Hello, everyone. I am John O'Loughlin. Welcome to McDuff Lives. And it's Tuesday evening, April 25th of 2023. And I'm delighted to welcome back our good friend Diane Sare, who is the candidate for U.S. Senate from the state of New York in 2024, an organizer with the LaRouche organization and the Schiller Institute, and somebody I've really gotten to know and respect over the past year and a half or so. It's really a pleasure to bring you back to the show, Diane. Welcome.
Well, thanks very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great, and we got so much going on. I guess I want to start, if you don't mind, with the big uh, splash or interventions that the folks from your organization have been really getting a lot of press for, and I applaud them for that. And I think they are exemplary young Americans that are stepping up, that are taking up the cause of well, confronting our politicians when they just don't want to answer the questions. So you, of course, have been one of the leaders organizing such events, as well as a very active person yourself, with a carrying a bullhorn around with you from time to time, and it's really exciting to watch you guys work. So how's that going? Are you getting any pushback? And on the contrary, are you getting some traction?
Well, there are more people doing this around the country. I think they have to perfect their camera and recording techniques, so we haven't seen them all on social media yet. But I got a report last night of a young fellow, a LaRouche supporter who also works with the People's Party, who went to see Senator Ron Wyden in Oregon. And to his shock, he actually got called on, so he didn't have to disrupt. Um, but he gave a whole briefing about the situation in Ukraine, how it started with the coup in 2014, the role of the Nazi Azov battalion and things like that, and Bandera, etc. And Wyden had a very nasty response, what you'd expect. Well, I support negotiations, of course, but Putin is the aggressor and blah, blah, typical line. But this is very good. We need more and more people to do this. I think the Nord Stream pipeline is a very sore spot. And speaking of spots, I think we should have the image of Lady Macbeth, out damn spot, out damn spot. They can't get rid of their guilt on this. It's not going to go away. And that's what Jose Vega has been hitting hard. And he got actually thrown on the floor today for the first time at a meeting of journalists at Columbia University. And we're finding, he and I and another organizer hit a journalism school where they were bemoaning the fate of the poor Wall Street Journal reporter who's in prison over there. You know who I'm referring to? Evan Gershkovitz. You know about this story?
Oh, no, I don't. Please tell me.
Well, a Wall Street Journal reporter somehow had left his post in Moscow and was in Yekaterinburg, which is where Russia produces all of its ammunition. And of course, Russia is at war, right? So he was meeting with people and collecting troves of classified documents. So Russia arrested him as a spy. And he's been sitting in prison. And the Wall Street Journal is quite outraged. I mean, the CIA would never embed people as journalists, of course not. So they were having a kind of a talk about how outrageous it is in Russia that you don't have freedom of the press. And we thought this was awfully rich, given Julian Assange has been sitting in prison for 4 years. Now you have Tucker Carlson being the #1 most popular show being removed from Fox. I mean, that hadn't happened when we went to this. So I just got up and said, you have no idea how stupid we look to the rest of the world. You're here talking about freedom of speech, and we have Julian Assange sitting in prison for 4 years. China and Russia are making peace deals between Iran and Saudi Arabia. The United States has nothing to offer anyone. And actually, I heard something last night that was attributed to the former king of Jordan, who apparently said once, it's dangerous to be an enemy of the United States. but it's twice as dangerous to be their ally. So you think about Ukraine, right? Our great ally. I mean, they've just hundreds of thousands of people dead, the whole country destroyed. Um, that's what people can expect now if they work with us. So, and then Jose got up and said, "You're a bunch of journalists. Why isn't Seymour Hersh here? He just broke the story of the century." And to my surprise, I thought part of why these videos went viral is because you're going after Pelosi or Hakeem Jeffries or Joe Biden or, a celebrity. Here we were at a journalism school, but this video went all over the place. And I called people, they say, "Oh, I saw you on the, whatever." I had no idea it had gone so viral. And I think Americans really have just about had it. And they appreciate people standing up to the lying, despicable media. We are under the worst wartime propaganda ever. So today I'm waiting for the rest of the videos. It was only a few hours ago, but I know Jose got up at a meeting of journalists, and the security came and threw him on the ground. And then other people got up, and so we'll have a very exciting, dramatic video when we get the whole thing together.
It is exciting. It is dramatic. It is also somewhat dangerous. And one of the groups that I noticed, one thing that noticed this week in the news, or last week, I guess, that really troubles me is there's a group of a black, I don't know how to describe them because I didn't study it, but I think they were leftists of some sort.
Yeah.
And you know the story, so
Yes.
I'll let you tell it. But the idea of criminalizing speech that would have tell people that they were, pro-Russia in a dispute that's happening over between Ukraine and Russia. That this is, well, I'd like you to speak to that.
Well, I do think in a sense it's a trial balloon because it's a very small organization. It's the African People's Socialist Party.
Okay.
Or the Uhuru group. And there's four of them. There was a candidate running for mayor of St. Petersburg, Florida. She's not included in the indictment, but and then three Russians. And they're claiming that these people conspired to use Americans as foreign agents on behalf of Russia. And then there's an illegal campaign donation of $100, which came into this mayoral candidate from someone who was a Russian citizen and not a U.S. citizen or green card holder. $100. I mean, really. And so they accuse them of sowing discord. The indictment, they actually say sowing discord is an indictable offense, meddling in elections, and being a Russian propagandist. And their election interference was so effective that the woman they were interfering, whose behalf they interfered, lost the election. I mean, so you're absolutely right. This is quite alarming. And actually, just one of the two last shows Tucker Carlson did was a very effective program on this case, where he said, I may or may not agree with what these people are saying, although a lot of what they're saying about Ukraine and Russia happens to be accurate. But you should be allowed to, if you want to say you're pro-Russian or anti-Russian or whatever, that's allowed according to the First Amendment of our Constitution. So I think it's extremely dangerous. The head of this group is 80 years old. They're going to put him in prison at that age. It's very ugly, and it's, I think, like January 6th, designed to put a chill on anyone who would consider speaking out.
Yes, indeed. Well, I've been deplatformed a couple of times now at YouTube, and I know what it feels like. I don't certainly have never gotten locked up or thrown to the floor like Jose was. And I applaud people that are out there willing to take those risks in the name of free speech and the American way of life. That's what they're after. They're trying to shut down our own personal future as American free citizens. They don't want us to have that good, beautiful future that we've always dreamed about. And they're doing everything they can, but pushing as far as they can on so many fronts. That one really disturbs me, and I'm glad you are cognizant of it. And it's just another reason that we need to keep speaking out. Used to say, "Speak truth to power," right?
Yes,
Remember that one? And
yes.
how about those buttons we used to wear that said "Question authority"?
Right.
You remember those? Well,
Yes.
nobody's wearing them anymore. No, no, they've been chilled.
Yep. You
Those
have to go to jail for having one.
and those hats, those baseball hats that say "obey" on it. I
I
mean,
don't remember that.
well, this was not us. This is more recent. I'm showing what they've done in contrast to what we did. They print these words like "obey" on a
Right.
hat, and people think that's the greatest fashion statement ever made. And so they wear these hats around, and everybody's looking at each other, and it says "obey" on their foreheads. That kind of thing.
Right.
You know, people are succumbing to this psychological warfare against our internal sense of freedom. And well, I'm sure that's one of the reasons that you are running for the Senate next year. Um, Let me ask you about that. You ran, of course, for the Senate last year. They obviously messed around with your polling numbers and with the numbers in the election, and but nevertheless, you got a good bit of visibility. I'll never forget the big poster that you had on the side of a building, and all of the efforts that you've made, you know, instead of saying, well, I lost, you've now using that for a springboard to go into the next campaign. But what motivates you to take on the really challenging job of being an independent candidate for US Senate?
Uh, I'm afraid that we're at a turning point where the human race may annihilate itself. And I think if I can do anything to prevent that from occurring, I should do it. I spent 35 years of my life working with Lyndon LaRouche, who had a similar attitude. It clearly wasn't about him. It was about, and he was also a very profound American patriot. And I want to bring that up because I think one of the most horrible things that's been done to young people is to destroy the history of our republic. That they are now being taught, in effect, that we were the same thing as the British Empire, that our economy was built on the back of slaves. And of course, that's absurd because why did the British want to keep the South under slavery? Because you can't build up anything under slavery. A human body, if you're going to depend on human physical labor, you're limited by how much you can lift. And I don't think people can lift a whole heck of a lot more now than they could 250 years ago. So we would have still been, pumping our water and been totally backwards. So the British wanted to make
You could have had a mule.
sure, right. Okay, a mule. I mean, forget it. The US never could have had 330 million people or whatever we have now
Yeah.
based on slavery. So it's just simply not true. And even George Washington came to the conclusion that this was wrong. He freed all of his slaves at the end of his life. Hamilton, of course, was very bold, and he had seen the most hideous forms of slavery in the Caribbean. People who were brought there from Africa, it was sort of like being sent into Bakhmut. I mean, they only lived a few months. It was the most absolutely horrific conditions. So our nation was explicitly founded against slavery, against that system. We couldn't, unfortunately, get rid of it in the first round because it wasn't possible to get the Constitution through. Um, but that is not why our nation was created. It was really an international project. So Americans have been totally robbed of any understanding of what our founding fathers believed in, what they fought for, what the fights were. And frankly, a lack of complexity, which also, this is the other aspect of the destruction of the education process, is classical drama. Because what do you learn from a good drama? You learn that there aren't really white hats and black hats. And particularly, I think Friedrich Schiller develops his characters extremely. They're so real, they could go almost any way. You can't profile what they're going to do exactly, which is what makes it so educating for the audience. But we don't study classical drama, so everyone wants to fall into a binary yes, no, for, against, so and so is good, so and so is bad. And, except for you and me, most people are not that consistent all the time. I know we are both consistently good and perfect, but everybody else may not be. And I think we have to understand that.
Well, that sounds very nice. I'm glad to be feeling so good about myself this evening, and I'll join your club. Um, yeah, but I hate to say yeah, but did you hear me just say yeah? But my dad used to get after us whenever you said yeah, but you said no, you can't say it. All right. Um, why the Senate? Why would you? Why not start with the House of Representatives? Is there? What would have been the difference, and why? I guess where you live there, the jurisdiction of New York that you live in would define where you would run. Did you consider running for Congress instead of running for the Senate?
Well, people proposed it, and I have to say my congressman is really horrible and therefore is quite a tempting target. Mike Lawler, his name is, total neocon, pro-war nut job. Um, but I think, we need someone who represents LaRouche's ideas to run a presidential campaign. And we're not quite in a position to do that. And I think the presidential situation is quite wild. Um, so, what was the closest thing to that? US Senate from New York, Hillary Clinton, Robert Kennedy. There's a precedent here from the state. The senators are very important. And I thought perhaps as a candidate for US Senate in New York, that it would be, in a sense, a vehicle, a vessel for the kind of leadership and policies that are really needed for the nation. So I'm running for US Senate, thinking about how to provide leadership nationally in terms of the kind of policies that need to be coming from the United States. And of course, US senators do play a major role in policy debate, and so on. So that's really why I think I thought I needed to do this. And also I saw they were so freaked out. I mean, clearly my campaign against Schumer was perceived as a major threat. They couldn't let me in the debate. They had to do this very peculiar thing with my vote. They clearly did everything possible to discourage me and my supporters. And so I said, well, if you think I'm that important, then I'm going to do this again.
And a different opponent this time. For those of us that are not New Yorkers, tell us a little bit about the incumbent, Kristen Gillibrand, or Kirsten, I should say.
Yes, Kirsten Gillibrand. Well, of course, she got in there when Hillary Clinton decided to run for president. She's very close to the Clintons.
So that Senate seat, Hillary's seat?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the one that would have been JFK Jr.'s seat, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, yes, exactly. So Gillibrand's family, and this was talked about some in upstate. I was just at a peace rally in Syracuse. Her father-in-law was, I think, vice president. He was briefly one of the top people at British Aerospace. He's British. She worked to get a British aerospace plant into Binghamton, New York. I believe others of her in-law family are all tied into this company. I mean, this is a massive arms dealing company. And you may recall this deal, Al Yamama, between, I think, Prince Bandar and Margaret Thatcher, where the Saudis were sending the British a tanker of petroleum a day in return for unlimited weapons from British Aerospace.
No, I didn't know about that.
Yeah, this was called Al Yamama, which means the dove. Okay. So one of our colleagues, Jeff,
That's not what it means in Black English, is it?
yeah, right, exactly. So we did some research on if you took all this petroleum and sold it on the spot market, what kind of a slush fund would you have? And it came out to about $80 billion from the late 1980s when the deal was made to 2001. And it was LaRouche's strong hypothesis that this was likely where the funding came from for the 9/11 attacks. This deal, again, the question is cui bono? Who would want to blow up all of Southwest Asia and really to destroy the last bit of innocence and goodwill of the United States by making our nation the aggressor, right? Going into all these nations, blaming, just jumping from one to the other. So I'm not sure what she would say about that or what she knows, but she married into it and she's been a big advocate for British aerospace. And she is now a prime sponsor of this horrific bill, which I understand is probably not going to go anywhere, but it's called the Restrict Act, which has to do with technology and meddling in the narratives in the United States. That and if you're owning a tech company or you're spreading disinformation about elections, you can be fined up to $250,000 and spend up to 20 years in prison. And part of the act says that FOIA doesn't apply. So you cannot use freedom of information if their case against you is classified documents. You're not allowed to know what it's about. It's pretty unbelievable. And the list of enemy nations in here are China, Russia, Iran, Venezuela, Cuba, and North Korea.
They are actually called enemy nations.
They are nations that if you're doing anything that could be said to benefit them at the expense of the U.S., that's
Gee.
the effect. And then about 2/3 of the bill, which is only 55 pages, is what these nations, how you get a nation off of this list. And the whole rigmarole and how many people in the Congress and the president personally has to say they're no longer a threat. I mean, it's really bad. It's really fascistic. And, so that bill may not go anywhere. Excuse me, my dog is about to choke to death on something. So
Oh,
I think I have to take it away from him. Hold on. He got a baseball and he's chewed the skin off. Come here. He's in a terroristic mood. I think he's going through adolescence. Hey, thank you. Ugh. Yuck. Well, I won't show this on the screen. It's pretty gross. But anyway. Okay.
oh, well, our dogs, they run our lives, don't they?
Yeah. Yes, they do.
Yeah, we love them.
We do. And I was thinking I should be a better dog parent and be much more in control, but somehow he seems to be running the show these days.
Believe me, you're not the only guest I have that has a dog. and I forgive all dogs and all dog owners automatically because I love dogs.
Great.
And dog people. So we were talking about Kirsten Gillibrand and her connections to the British aspect of the deep state, the arms industry, and doing secret deals that involve billions of dollars. And, that sounds like the kind of person that would be happy or not maybe too upset if the United States happened to crumble into fall apart into different ways, the way, they kind of wanted us to do in the Civil War and have wanted us to, divide us and conquer us, to put it very bluntly. And that economic power to divide and conquer us is now multiplied by the psychological warfare that they're putting at us 24/7 through the media, these constructed narratives that you're not allowed to veer from, or you get deplatformed. And this is not America. This is not the country that we want it to be. So people like you are standing up, and I applaud you. What other issues should we talk about in terms of the Senate campaign and New York specifically? New York leads the nation in many ways still. It's a very, very important jurisdiction. So, what else are the issues that you are going to fashion your campaign around?
Well, Gillibrand also is one of the big people, I think, trying to create the conditions for this central bank digital currency. Um, and New York is the home of Wall Street, which is the root of all evil, you might say, in the US, or at least the money bags for all evil. Wall Street and the New York Federal Reserve, they're both here. Uh, so these are very big issues. I mean, in a sense, New York isn't that different from the rest of the country. The average people are feeling the pinch of the hyperinflation. They're appropriately anxiety ridden about where this war is going. With Ukraine, we're not able to supply enough ammunition. So the obvious question is, when we run out of ammunition, are we going to be sending American troops? I heard an interview with Robert Kennedy Jr. that actually he was doing with Scott Ritter, where he talked about his son in the military being in Ukraine, having just been in Ukraine. So clearly we have American troops on the ground doing things there. Maybe not yet a huge number, but we have, I don't know, 30 or 40,000, 40,000, I think it is, in Romania. At what point are we going to be told they have to be sent in? At what point will it be admitted we're in a hot war with Russia, which we're in no position to win? And will some arrogant, pompous, deluded idiot think that we can survive a nuclear war? I mean, these things, or could we get into one by mistake? I don't think Russia is going to start a nuclear war. Putin is very concerned about that. And frankly, given everything that's been hurled at Russia, he has been rather calm, premeditated, uh, says before the fact what he intends to do. Uh, Not so from the United States. And maybe you saw the story that just broke in the Washington Post, which I don't think is fully true, but we can try and guess what it's sort of like the shadows on the wall, where they say that Ukraine was planning to launch a major offensive with strikes on Moscow on February 24th, the 1-year anniversary of the special military operation, but somehow Washington prevented them from doing it. So this is a nonsensical story. I don't think that's true, but something is true. Certainly, Russia has been very clear about the role of the British and the US. And you remember early on, the US was bragging about how we supplied the Ukrainian army with the intelligence to kill 12 Russian generals. So at what point do we just say, let's stop the charade? It's a war between NATO and Russia, the US and Russia, all bets are off, and it's the end of everything. I mean, I think this is really, if people aren't concerned about that, they're not in the right world. And unfortunately, I have to say, I've seen far too much irrationality, and I think really born of a kind of very ugly arrogance from people here to think that we're not in danger, we just shouldn't worry about it, or no one would be that crazy. I think that would be a mistake.
It's one of those interesting conundrums where you almost feel like you're saying the sky is falling, and if you say it too many times, that people are going to stop listening to you. Um, that is the sign of our lifetimes. I mean, I noticed that a lot of the young folks that are making these protest announcements are very, very vociferous. If we don't stop this war, it could be the end of the earth, the end of mankind, the end of all human life forever. We've got to stop this war. And you and I, we've been under that pressure for what, 50 years. And it doesn't get any easier, but we have to manage that to keep our critical thinking skills alive and not jump into just a hyper state of
Correct.
fear all the time. So,
That's
you
that's
know what I'm saying? It's like you have to manage these stresses while you're still thinking through the logical, real answer to it. So it's anyway. That's my experience.
You're very right. And I think, we have to have faith in miracles, which are really not miracles, which is that if you fight hard with everything you have and you tell the truth and you fight for the truth, the universe works. You have a great advantage because the universe can't lie. There's a principle of natural law which responds. And therefore, something may break in a way that's completely unexpected, which allows the situation to be changed by what appears to be a relatively weak force that is telling the truth. We don't have, what does Jose Vega have? He grew up in the Bronx in a very difficult circumstance. He doesn't have the resources that people at NBC News do, or the US military, or Hollywood, but he's certainly become quite famous. And I don't know if you're aware, if Daniel discussed with you, they've started a whole training school where they have Zoom calls with 60 people to teach people around the country how to do this. And he's actually calling for someone, and we need 435 people. He said, we need one truth crusader in every congressional district. And he said, it doesn't have to be a candidate. He pointed Kynan Thistlethwaite, his cohort there, is 21 years old. He's too young to run for Congress. And Jose said, so you don't have to be a candidate. All you have to do is hold the Congress and hold the candidates accountable by intervening in this way.
That is fantastic. I congratulate him, and that's the kind of thing it takes. People having to just light a fire in people's minds and people's hearts to say we've got a great country here. Let's not let it go down. And that war in Ukraine just keeps on going on. And my personal opinion, I think that it is a way for them to depopulate the young men of Ukraine, as one of the Russian generals said the other day. The people of Ukraine should recognize that what's happening here is the young men of Ukraine are getting demolished, wiped out. And you keep throwing them at the Russian professional Russian army, and they keep on dying. And this is the people pulling the puppet strings behind Zelensky know this, and this is big money going to come in. And, whenever this war is over, if any part of Ukraine is still under those Zelensky regime, then it's all going to be swept up by huge capital, and they're all going to come in. I mean, the greatest farmland in the world, right? BlackRock, Vanguard, you've heard the names, and
Yeah.
and it's real. This destruction, this war is not.
That
In
wasn't
other words, I think the war is not necessarily so much about controlling this or that amount of territory as it is about just destroying the young men of Ukraine. I know that's a terrible way to look at it, but geez, it looks like, that's what's happening.
right. That certainly is what's happening, for sure. No, it's very ugly. It's very evil. It is really evil. And it's being done in our name. And that's why people need to stand up.
That's right. Amen. Okay. What else you want to talk about tonight, Diane? It's
Well, I mentioned, and I think this is a good thing to consider, today is April 25th, which is the anniversary of the meeting at the Elbe River. And that was when the Soviet soldiers and the Americans finally severed the supply lines of the German army, and they knew that the war was going to end. And it was a totally joyous occasion. And apparently they had tried to stage, they also wanted to stage it. And I forget now, I watched a bunch of films about this a few years ago, about how people couldn't speak the language, and then people went to the wrong place, and the guy who was supposed to translate but there was just such a feeling of goodwill. And then everybody saw each other, and they all had things that they wanted to swap. So they were Some people had cigarettes, some people had lighters, people gave each other gifts. I mean, this incredible, joyous sense of victory against fascism. And I think it's a very good template because, frankly, that's the natural state of mankind. Nobody wants to be at war. Nobody wants to harm another human being. That's very unnatural. You have to be trained to do that, or scared into it, or tortured into it, or have been dropped on your head as an infant, or something like that, to want to do harm to another human being. So the spirit of the Elba, I think, is very much worth remembering. And also, we should remember that we said never again to this idea of Nazism and fascism, which we seem to be looking the other way on.
And that brings up, the idea, the horrible concept of racism, which is just poisons our world. Because I look at the Russian that experience of, there we are, we've just mutually defeated, Nazis. We've defeated the worst enemy that mankind has ever faced. We now have met at the Elba. We're shaking hands. We're hugging each other. We're exchanging our souvenirs. We're doing the Cossack dance on the floor. We're drinking all the vodka in town. We're having the best time ever. I actually know a gentleman that was part of that, actually.
Oh, wow.
So it was real. I mean, his stories were worth a few minutes to hear. So, but that goodwill that you speak of, why did it go away? And my suggestion is that there's so many not even subtle hints that Slavs are different from Western Europeans. That that there's different, they're just not like us. And you hear that from people that are associated with the World Economic Forum, for instance, talking about we're in the garden, and all of these other places are in the jungle, and
Right, exactly. Well, didn't we hear that about the Vietnamese? Well, they just don't value human life like we do. That's why we're carpet bombing and killing millions of them. Yeah, it's
it doesn't pass the think test, but nevertheless it passes the something in people's guts, that, like the Azov battalion, like the Nazis in Ukraine right now, they have that, something different in the way they think from the way that we think, and that has within it the capacity to commit genocide. And
well,
you and I just don't think that way, but there are people out there that have adopted this race. I'm in the superior race, I'm the chosen people, if you will, or I'm the Aryans, and all the rest of these people, from the historical, trains are, they're just not as good as us. So we need to lead, and if they don't let us lead, well, we just have to get them out of the way.
right. And they work on that. I mean, remember, the coup was in 2014. This is now 9 years later. So people who were 10, 11, 12, 13 were they had horrible training camps to get people to go along with that ideology. And then the other thing is drugs. A lot of these soldiers are drugged because people won't commit those kind of atrocities. Also, you don't have the energy to continue doing it. And all kinds of actual physical medical experiments were being done on this population. I mean, there were 46. Victoria Nuland called them bio-research facilities, but she admitted they were there. One of the things the Russians have said is that many of the Ukrainian troops that have been captured are on all kinds of antibiotics for this and that. That the Ukrainians blew up a prison with their own POWs in it. Now, why would you kill all your POWs? Maybe you don't want the Russians finding out what kind of meds people are on, and the kind of things they were finding out about these people.
Or maybe they were experimenting on them in some way that if those people got into the general population, there could have been a medical problem, a huge one. That I saw a picture today, I think it was a 2005, and it had Senator Richard Lugar of Indiana, Senator Barack Obama of Illinois, and they were in the Ukraine celebrating the initiation of this of this pact in which we started these bioweapons labs.
Wow.
And right there, and there's a picture of Obama and Lugar. Man, when Obama and Lugar are in the same picture, I mean, people that know those guys, you got to realize, this is not a real, fight between Democrats and Republicans. I guess the uniparty would be the best way to put it. How do you view the combination of dinos and rhinos that seems to somehow between the two of them, control the agenda?
Well, you're absolutely right. That's why I'm running as an independent. Look, you see these votes for sanctions on Russia in the US Senate, it's like 98-2, right? It's unbelievable, the unit. And then you look at this is another reason to run for federal office. And I do think this is a change. Maybe you can tell me if not. These congressmen are running all over the planet, stirring up trouble. I don't remember the Congress being allowed that much latitude to provoke war everywhere. It would normally be the president, right? Or some kind, but you see these congressmen like Nancy Pelosi and then Kevin McCarthy. It's certainly not a partisan thing, flying over to Taiwan and trying to encourage them to stick their finger in China's eye. And the people of Taiwan really don't want to provoke a war with China. They don't want to end up like Ukraine. We saw that in the last elections. The pro-independence party of Tsai Ing-wen did very poorly, but we're over there to egg them on and stir things up. And we see that in Ukraine. Remember, John McCain was photographed with people wearing the swastika things on them, the Azov battalion. I mean, what are they doing? So it is really peculiar. You definitely get the sense that at the town hall meeting I had on Saturday, Scott Ritter brought up this, I think it's called the interagency group, which he made the point, has anyone ever voted for this group? Did you ever see anything on your ballot? Did you ever hear a hearing about them in the Congress? Well, why is it that they would have the authority to tell Joe Biden, who apparently when he came in said he wanted to go back to single purpose, I think that's what it's called, that you only would use nuclear weapons for deterrence? And what Scott Ritter was told by some people at a anniversary of the INF treaty is they said, well, Biden was told by the interagency group that they weren't ready to do this. So Ritter said, well, we elect the president. What is this group calling the shots, making the decisions? We don't even know who's on the group. We don't know what else they're telling the president. I mean, that is pretty scary. In the United States of America, that you can have these dark groups, just like the dark money, all these things that are secret that we don't get to know about, and our vote has no power to change.
Right, and there we are, right back to November the 22nd, 1963, when they took out the one president that could have changed all that. And now we're stuck back, with them running things from the back rooms and the boardrooms and the banks and the City of London and wherever else the power lies. And, we don't know for certain, where that ultimate power is. One of the things I do on my show is try to find it. Some people say it's in Switzerland at the BIS. Some people say it's in London at the City of London and the Bank of England. And some people say, no, it's the Rockefellers. They're the ones that are in charge. And then, you get a whole lot of interesting information when you pull these strings. But it definitely takes a lot of time. But I've been enjoying trying to find, who's really, the question came up yesterday. this purported committee of 300 that consists of the ancient noble families of Europe and the connections with the Club of Rome, and what is Henry Kissinger's role in that? And they're saying, well, Henry might be working for them. He might be one of their minions. But that's not the way I've come at it. I've thought, well, no, they're probably working for Henry Kissinger. That's my thought. And so I'm like, well, which way is it? So I did a whole show last night just to go through. Found four different theories of who started the Club of Rome. And they're all different, but they're all very good narratives. And I could believe any one of them if it weren't for the other three.
Right. Well, that's useful. I think what we have to look at is what we can control and what, frankly, is the lesson of every good tragedy, which is ourselves. Because, and Lyndon LaRouche used to really go after the way they teach tragedy, where they say, well, Hamlet, it's all about Hamlet, and he failed to make the right decision. He failed to act. And he said, no, Hamlet's failure was that he didn't challenge the culture of the day. The whole society was a mess. Think about poor Ophelia, how she was being used sort of as a prostitute, right, by her family. So you think it's fine to, pimp out your daughter, and in other words, the entire society was completely rotten. And that was the moral of the story, so to speak. It wasn't just about one guy. The failure of Hamlet was he didn't challenge the culture that he was living in. Or you see it in Don Giovanni, the opera, where at the end the commendatory shows up, the statue, and hello, he gets swallowed up in the flames of hell. And what do the people do? They say, oh my gosh, we've really got to change. No, they continue with the party like nothing happened.
Don Giovanni.
Yes, lovely.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite roles. I'm going back on the stage this fall, by the way.
Oh yeah.
I'll be singing Colina in La Boheme. So
Oh wow.
yeah, that'll be up in New Jersey. Maybe I'll send you
Yeah.
some info when it comes along. When
Let me know. I would definitely come.
Yeah. Oh God, I'd love to sing those classic, basso profundo. That's where my voice lies.
That's why you are standing up against fascism.
Yes.
Because this classical tradition, which is not fiction, right? It's a story, but it's about a universal principle.
Your comments about Hamlet, I don't want to let them go without getting back to you on that. I think you're absolutely right in that Lyndon LaRouche is a master of Shakespeare. And to look at Hamlet after reading some of his writings on it, I see it through new eyes. His understanding and seeing through. And I love the idea that I'm left with, that what Shakespeare was doing in all these plays, and I think Othello is another one that's just absolutely essential in this regard, is telling us, hey, there is a deep state. There is a deep state. They are running things. You are being treated like an actor on a stage. You
Right.
will, you're given your lines, you deliver your lines, and then you're gone. And that's what I see when I think about my father and the story that I'm telling about him and his life and how his, brief candle was snuffed out quite early in life, and how they used him and how they use everybody, and then they're done with you. And if we don't intervene, and come out and say, to Lady Macbeth, hey, you got a spot on your gown, it ain't coming out.
Right.
President Biden, the hole in the North Sea there, that's yours. Your responsibility. You put that spot there, and that's a horrible thing to do because it messes up. I mean, even just the methane that was
Right.
the horrible releases of noxious gases was one thing, but the destruction of what really would have been good for millions and millions of people, and that is reasonably priced heating oil in the wintertime. Um, why interfere with that unless you really are on a mission for those people behind the scenes? If you're not on a mission to complete some kind of a grab that they're making, they're taking something, and you're just being used. And I've seen that as I studied what happened, not only to my father, but other members of my paternal family as they were drawn into the deep state machinations and then ended up with bad outcomes. It's it's real. Telling my father's story, I think, is what my contribution is, and then trying to draw out as much as I can of the goodness in the world so that people can see that no, it's not inevitable. This thing that they're trying to make it look like it's inevitable by deplatforming. I mean, that's one of the nastiest things I've seen lately is AOC coming out with a little TikTok video. It's been everywhere. You've probably seen it, in which she's gloating over how, oh, we deplatformed Tucker. You know, deplatforming works. Yeah, well, I know what it feels like to get deplatformed. Not only does it cost you money, but it's kind of like the world. The world is saying to you, "We're not going to let you speak. We're not going to let you have your moment to say what's on your mind anymore." In other words, you're now a slave, and to allow something like that to happen in this country, which is the last best hope of mankind on earth, is a crime that we just can't allow. So that's why we do it. Sorry, I ended up talking about myself.
That's fine. It's exactly right what you were saying.
All right. Well, it's 8:51 on a Tuesday evening here. Beautiful evening here on Mystery Island in Southern Maryland. I assume it's also a nice evening up there in New York. And I thank you for joining me tonight, Diane. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you, as always.
Okay. All right, everybody. We'll see you guys tomorrow. I'll be joining, Mark Kulak will be joining my show tomorrow night, Housatonic Live, and that's always exciting. So we'll see you then. Good night, and thanks for joining us. Bye now.